exciting. So I personally love historical fiction books. It is literally one of my favorites, but I have to say I've never gone quite so far back in time as what you write about. But we're not massively here to talk about just about, you know, your books. It's about how on earth do I get from, oh, I have an idea in my head, to here is the book.
Oh, okay. So I think normally what I suggest to people if they've not started writing yet is that they read a lot, because if you're going to write in a particular genre, it is helpful if you are comfortable with that genre and enjoy that genre, because without, you don't have to study it or pull it apart to work out how it works or anything like that. You just need to just read for your own pleasure, and your brain will automatically and unconsciously work out what are the kind of archetypal stories in there, what things you enjoy, and it will come back out in your writing. And it's really, really beneficial. So reading a lot and then writing a lot. And it's really beneficial to go and do some writing courses, especially if there's someone sort of expecting something from you. So you're obliged to write. There's a bit of that obligation feeling, because your writing gets better naturally without you thinking about it. And I know that happens because I've had people give feedback. So when I did a creative writing PhD, and I had written a novel which had been super polished by a professional editor. We got very close to having it published traditionally. And that's the novel that my PhD supervisor read to let me into the PhD. And then I brought him the first 4,000 words of the next novel, which were, I'd just written them and just not even bothered proofing, nothing. I just handed them in first draft. And he said, this is better. And I was like, it can't be better. The other one was super polished by, you know, and he's like, no, this is better because you're getting to be a better writer because you're writing more. And I just, it's very hard to see it yourself. I would have said it was the same as the other one, but looking back afterwards, you can see the difference. So the more you write, you will get better at it, whether you realize it or not.
I mean, you're practicing, right? It's the same as if you're doing football or clay shooting.
Yes, exactly. No, I'm a big fan of saying to people, writing is a job like any other job. It's not some magical, mystical thing where the muse comes and sits next to you and you just sort of, you know, channel the muse. You sit there and you get better at it as you go along, just as you would with any other job. So it is about the practicing.
Yeah. Now, like I said, I have done some back sort of research. Now, interestingly, it's sort of one of these things you didn't know about me things. So you never actually went to school in the traditional sense.
No, so I was
Italian hillside type thing. And so obviously this is great for all homeschool Zoom. Like there is hope.
There is hope.
So how were you always a writer? As in, I have a problem with the word always, but did you kind of always kind of feel like this is my thing?
I always read a lot. Like I said, it's important to read a lot. I read and read and read and read as a child. I learned to read quite fast, which I think is why my mother then thought, oh, I can do this homeschooling lark. This is easy, because look at her. She learned to read fast. I don't think she realized that was my thing. And that's why I learned that bit quite so easily and not all the other stuff. So I read a lot. I read huge amounts of mythology from all over the world. There's a photo of me sort of curled up with this gigantic tome that I'm holding, and I can't have been more than 9 in the picture. And it's like, that is a classic picture of my childhood. So I read and read and read, and I wrote stories and little things then. The sort of writing bit didn't start coming out as much, I think, until sort of my mid-20s. But I think all that going inness, it started coming back out at some point. Yeah.
So for the benefit of our sort of members who might be onto a second, third, fourth career, is there something you recommend? You know, when is a good time to become an author? Is there a good time to become an author?
Well, I didn't go full time until about 6 years ago. So that's when I was 40-ish. I was writing all the way through my 30s, you know, little bit on the side here and there. I mean, I look back at it now and I think, oh, I could have written so much more. I had so much free time. I didn't have little children. I could have, wow. I just look at it and I'm like, But, you know, all those little bits of writing, I was learning things as I went along. I took a few writing courses. I did a sort of correspondence one. I did ones at the City Lit and sort of little courses here and there. I got into a couple of magazines. I wrote a novel. So I was putting together those little bits bit by bit, and I tried going the traditional publishing route. So I went through all you get an agent and you do the publishing rounds and all of that stuff, working with an editor, a lot of learning process. And at the point where I felt like, no, you know what, I'm tired of this traditional publishing route. It's not working for me. And I had a fully written novel that I was pretty confident in. I had a second child, and I looked at the finances and I just went, so I would be paying in childcare what I would earn, and I was on a perfectly good salary, and I just went, this is stupid. Why would I do that? So I just went, right, I shall make the leap now. This is the leaping moment, which was a bit scary because I had one unpublished book, you know, a little bit of savings, and it was kind of like, oh. But the interesting thing to me is that when you leap, the doors open. It's really weird. I mean, really weird, to the point where I said to my husband, I don't understand, like, I've wanted to be a writer for years and none of these doors opened. And I jumped. I went, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a full-time author with nothing there in front of me. And all these doors opened that I would have given anything for before. So sometimes I think when you really commit to something,
it's the commitment,
and you jump, the doors open.
Yeah. So would you then, I mean, there's definitely a question about the self-publishing route, but before that, so would you recommend perhaps staying in your current job and doing all these little bits on the side? Or if you've kind of already done that, presumably if you have this book inside you, you may already have done that. But would you say that that is what led you to feeling confident enough to make the leap?
Yeah, I think it's beneficial to do your training while you've still got a job, you know, because the job is going to keep you going in terms of we all have to pay our bills. And that gives you the time to go in and play a bit and try different things. You know, I did a picture book and I got an agent for that, and we tried the publishers and it didn't work. And then I didn't have a regular writing habit. I didn't really know what genre I wanted to write in. And then I went back to the agent and went, actually, I want to write historical fiction. She was like, that's not what I do. And so I left that agent quite amicably and everything, but I felt terrible. I was like, oh my God, I had an agent and I lost them, and that's it. That's the end of my writing career. But actually, that was a bit of exploration. That was a bit of trial and error. And I think a bit of trial and error while you've still got some security is a good plan. At the point where you're going to jump, you need to have a bit of savings and some confidence in some material that you've got ready to go with. Because otherwise it's a bigger risk than is necessary, really.
And are there any writing courses that are better than others, or that you would recommend, or just anything to make you write? I think anything that will make you write is good. I think you can, it depends how self-disciplined you are. I worked through Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. It's a very good book. It gives you confidence in your creative self and explores your creative self and gives you a lot of writing exercises. So that's a good thing to work through. And, you know, that's pretty cheap. You can just buy the book and do that. If you're somewhere that has some writing courses available to you, either online or, I mean, there's lots more online nowadays, but I went to City Lit in London and did a couple of courses with them. I think anything that's going to make you write is helpful. I also did the Writers Bureau, which is like a correspondence course. And again, it was just the fact that the Writers Bureau make you do
pretty much every kind of writing you can think of. They start you with, you know, letters to magazines and go all the way through to novels, non-fiction, everything. They just oblige you to try everything, which is a good in a way, because if you're not sure what you want to write, at least you have a go at everything and go, you know, I hated that, but I love this thing that I didn't even know was a thing. So that can be useful. And you have a tutor who's marking your stuff. So you're getting feedback on what you're good at and what you're not, and what you need to be working on. And the idea that someone's expecting something back from you is quite a good thing to have.
And cost-wise, are we talking thousands of pounds or, you know,
no. So as I say, you could just get a book, which would be like £10–11. So that's probably the cheapest way to do it, is to just get a book and follow all their sorts of things. And there are lots of good books out there like that. I think Writers Bureau was at the time maybe £200, but it was a pretty substantial course, and they had a lot of freedom about how long you took to do it. It's probably a little more by now, but it was a good course. Courses at things like City Lit or online can be fairly cheap, you know, maybe £50–100 for quite a few classes, which is a good thing to be able to work your way through. Hi.
And here is Diane. I love you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Melissa. I don't know if you remember, but I had a chat with you.
Yeah, I do. How are you getting on?
Sorry?
How are you getting on?
I took your advice and I did the, well, I didn't quite finish.
Can you record?
Yeah. And it wasn't really the right time. It was kind of too soon, and it would have been better if I had a regular writing habit so that I knew what I wanted to write. So it's a good way of developing that.
So in terms of sort of getting an agent then, or sorry, Diane, I'm now just sort of jumping onto other things.
Exactly my question. Perfect.
Oh yeah. So if you don't have an agent, and you've obviously done both, which is exactly why this question is so important. What's the pros and cons of either, basically?
Okay, so traditional publishing, I think most people have some awareness of how that works. Basically, you've written something, presumably it's fairly good. You need to polish that as much as you can to get as much feedback on it and get it to a really good stage. Then you start looking for an agent. The way you get an agent, I'm going to talk mostly about the UK, is you get the Writers and Artists Yearbook, which is a gigantic red tome. And it lists all the literary agents for the UK and what they cover. So it's very important to do your research. You go through that and you just marker anybody that takes your genre. So if you write historical fiction and you go to someone who does thrillers, you are completely wasting your time and theirs. It's just, that's not going to happen. So you must pick the people who match what you write. You go through, you pick all of those. Some people they do this weird thing where they'll pick like 5 agents and then they practically stalk them to put personal details into the letter and everything. And I think that's kind of a waste of time. You just need to make sure that agent takes your genre and write a nice professional letter that says, this is me, this is what I write, here's the manuscript. Almost every, all of them on their website will give you very precise instructions for how to apply, and you follow those submissions requirements to the letter. You don't deviate in any way, because it makes you look professional and like you've taken the time to check what they want. I'm a big fan of quantity, because they're very slow to reply. They just are. It takes 3 months to reply. That's pretty standard. So if you're going to go to 5 agents and then wait 3 months and then they all say no, which is very likely, and then you're going to go out to another 5 and take it. I mean, you could be there for years. So I don't recommend that. I recommend starting with at least 20. Send it out. As a courtesy, you put in the bottom of your letter, you say, I am, sending out multiple submissions. That's a courtesy to them to let them know other people are being approached at the same time. But you need to equalize the power a little bit. You can't make everything be to them. You have to also think about yourself. What tends to happen then is you usually send the first 3 chapters. And what you're hoping for is that someone will come back and ask for the full manuscript. This is a really good sign. It means they like what they saw. And then you will go back with the full manuscript. Now, this is my point. This is my top tip. When one agent comes back and says, I'd like to see the full manuscript, you say, great, and you send it to them. You then phone all the other agents or email them and say, someone has asked to see the full manuscript. Would you like to see the full manuscript? This is really important because it gets everybody moving. And then they go, oh, whoops, somebody might grab something that I want. And you will see a substantial change in how people behave at that point. They will then all go either yes or no more quickly. And then again, if an agent contacts you after that stage and says, I'd like to have a chat, I'd like to potentially represent you, you very quickly ring everybody else and say, somebody would like to represent me. Would you like to have a chat? You watch how fast people move. So again, it's just equalizing the power a little bit. I don't like I'll just sit here and be Cinderella and wait for Prince Charming to turn up. Equalize the power a little bit in your favor. So at that point, hopefully, if you've put it together good enough work, an agent will want you. Even better if you get to choose from multiple agents, that's even nicer. Hopefully you find someone who really loves your work, who really gets you, who's very excited because they're the ones that have then got to go and represent you and put across that excitement. So that's quite important. Then it's their job to take that manuscript and find you a publisher. I'm afraid a lot of people have in mind that if they get an agent, that equals a publisher. That is not always the case. I've had agents twice and neither of them has managed to find a publisher. What you then get is the responses from publishers, and they will come back with comments on it, whether they like it, whether they don't like it, whatever. The reason I had faith in my first novel was because the responses coming back were extremely positive, and nobody's obliged to say nice things to you. They can just go, no thanks, it's not my cup of tea at all. So because I'd had a lot of good feedback from agents and a lot of good feedback from publishers, I then felt quite confident in that novel. But it's a very, the downside of trad publishing is there's a lot of luck and trends and just the moment not being right sometimes. And also they view books in a very different way. So I got very, very close to a very big publisher and they said, we love this book. Could you tighten up the ending a little bit? We want it a bit more thrillery, a bit more, sort of intense. So we went away, we got the editor back, we did tons of work, sent it back. They went, oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, but we just bought a book very similar. And I thought, oh my God, they've just bought a book with 18th century concubines in the Forbidden City. Who's writing that? And I was a bit shocked. And then I found out what the novel was. And the novel was 1920s Shanghai brothel. And I kind of went, that's a completely different thing. But in their minds, that was broadly Asia, historical fiction, maybe a little bit sexy, who knows, that sort of thing. That'll do. So they, for them, from a marketing point of view, they would have got marketed the same way. So it's a similar book. So no, one or the other. And that made me get a bit annoyed in the end, because I felt like, no, but I have a good novel here and I've put in the work and I am not prepared for you to tell me I can't publish it because there's something similar. People who are going to read that book are also going to read my book. There doesn't have to be an either or. And I try and describe it to people regards my PhD. I worked for 3 years on that. I put a lot of effort in. If I'd walked into my Viva exam and they had said, lovely work, fantastic, but we just gave a PhD this morning to someone, so we can't give you one, that would make no sense. And that's how I felt about it in the end. I was like, okay, I think you have a narrower view of readers than I do. So the thing with trad publishing is it's very established. They know what they're doing. You won't have to put any money up front. They will take care of the covers. They will do the marketing. You also need to play your part in marketing, whichever way you publish. But, there's a lot of professional people and they'll take good care of it. But there are downsides. There's a lot of the trends luck element, which I really dislike. because I feel if you've put in the work, then why shouldn't that book go out into the world? And you have the kudos. You have the kudos of going, I was chosen. So-and-so says I'm a good writer. Ex-publisher, blah, blah, blah. Indie publishing, which is self-publishing, has other benefits to it. You don't have that kudos. You don't have the pat on the back from someone to say, well done, you did it right, you're a good writer. But you have a lot more freedom, and there isn't that barrier of, well, we bought a book similar to yours, so we can't do yours. So in the end, I went down the self-publishing route because I was getting frustrated, because I thought, no, I have a good novel. It's been professionally edited. It's had good feedback. I don't see why it can't go out into the world. And in the end, I just said, I'm going to try. I'm just going to see what happens to it. And here I am. And it did well. You know, I now earn my living as an author. And that took me 6 years to build up the income and to get some, not that you need qualifications, but I built up those sorts of experiences and a back catalogue, because you're never going to make it on one book. You're going to need lots. But that worked out for me. And if I kept waiting for the trad publishing, in the end, I felt a bit like it made me feel passive. It made me feel like I'm just sat here waiting for Prince Charming to rock up. And I disliked that feeling. I'm a control freak. I was more prepared to go out and just do it myself. And it is a big undertaking, because you become a sort of authorpreneur. You have to be an entrepreneur. You're running a business, and you have to be able to do both the creative and think like a business at the same time. I quite enjoy it, but you know.
How do you, I mean, that is incredible story. And I kind of find it really interesting how, so we can't have two books that are about, you know, the same continent, but we can have a million, you know, the romances and thrillers and spy novels, and
yep,
they're all the same.
Yeah, but actually romance, fantastically heavily populated by self-published authors, and thrillers, quite a lot of them coming through as well, because they figured out that actually there is room for everybody, and that people read, when they like something, they will read a lot of it.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. I love, like I said, I love historical fiction personally. And I really quite like, you know, the 1920s and that sort of thing. But sort of not going into my personal likings, but how do you then go about self-publishing? Okay. Where do you even start? You know, there isn't the book, or is there the book?
Well, so amusingly to me, the same people who do the Writers and Artists Yearbook, which is very focused, the Red Book, which is very focused on traditionally published, brought out a book about being self-published, which I contributed a chapter to. So, you know, I'm kind of proud of it, but it also made me laugh that that book was traditionally published. So that's a little bit of a ironic one. There are plenty of books about self-publishing, and I think, you know, when I sat down and I thought, right, I'm going to self-publish, I knew nothing about it, nothing. I started with Joanna Penn, who's a very big indie author and who has a lot of interesting information. I basically read her website for 6 months. I just read it and read it and read it until I sort of had some kind of a handle on things and could start. So with self-publishing, you go back, you've got your manuscript. Hopefully you've done a lot of polishing work on it. I have an editor work on mine. Wherever you possibly can, you should work with an editor. You're going to learn so much about your craft. It is expensive, but it's worth it because you are learning as you go along. So you'll have an editor clean it up as much as possible, as in question you often about how does this plot work? Why does the character do that? So there's structural editing, which is all about the structure of it. Then you have line edits, which is more about your grammar, the way you're phrasing things, that kind of thing. And then you have proofing, which is just get rid of the typos. By that point, you know, your character and your plot, that's a different issue. So you've got a nice, well-presented piece of work. You are then going to have to turn it into an actual book, whether it be ebook or paperback. that comes down to formatting, basically. So you either invest in some software that can do that, or you have a professional formatter do it. I have a formatter do mine because I was just like, at the time I was like, I'm learning too many things. Somebody has to come in and help out here. I would always recommend a professional cover designer, because the difference between one that you've made yourself and one that a cover designer has made is, it's just visible from a distance. And you can say what you like, but people do judge books by covers, and it's fair. It's not an unfair thing to say. The cover is designed to tell the right readers that this is the right book for them. So there are books, and you will know, everyone will know this, there are books that you will look at the cover of and go, I don't read that. This is a genre, a group that I don't read. I'm not interested in. So the cover needs to tell you that, and it needs to tell you, oh, I like books that look like that, so probably I'm going to like this one. That's the purpose of a book cover. And a lot of people get and I've made this mistake, you get sort of sold on a concept that you like, but that isn't actually doing the job the cover's supposed to do. And then the reader's looking at it going, I don't know what that is. What is that? And they won't give it more time than that. They will give it that, and that's it. They will not stand there. People haven't got time to stand there and go, oh, it doesn't look like what I normally read, but maybe I'll investigate. That's not what happens very often. So a book cover is your first and one of your most important pieces of marketing. So it's worth investing in. So basically you'll then have two files. You'll have a file that's the cover and a file that's the interior. You will then upload it onto a platform, which would be something like Amazon or Kobo or whatever. And that then either becomes an ebook. So it's been formatted to be an ebook, and basically you put it up as a file and someone downloads it as a file, and that's that. Or you upload it as a file, and then you have print on demand technology. I love this technology so much, and I'm so grateful that I'm an author now, because even 10, 15 years ago, this is not how it would have worked. Print on demand is I upload the file that tells a printer how to produce that book, how the layout's all supposed to look, all the rest of it. And if you go and order one of my books in paperback, a printer will print one copy and send it to you. So within a couple of days, one copy of my book will be printed and sent to you. I don't have to do anything except pick up the royalty for it. It's a really nice piece of technology. Whereas, I don't know, 15 years ago, I would have had to buy 5,000 copies of my book and have it somewhere in the house. And then I would have had to take it to the post office. And, the technology is, mwah, I love it. And then your book's out there, and then you have to market it.
This sounds incredible.
I love print on
all
demand.
of what's coming out of your mouth right now. It's just so exciting. And okay, let's carry on then. So how do you go about marketing it if you're self-publishing?
Okay, so there's
yes, just carry on.
There's lots of levels of stuff. Okay, so there's some basic levels, which I always say to people, just start doing this stuff now, like sort out a website and the book cover and those sorts of things. Get your marketing at the base steady, because those are your foundations. And a lot of people will skimp on the cover, for example. They'll just put something together that they did or their mate did, and it's not really good enough. And then they'll get really frustrated because the marketing isn't working. All marketing is only designed to drive you to the page where you click the buy button. That's all it's designed to do. So if you get to that page and the final decision lies on the cover, the blurb, and the general feel of that book when they're about to press the buy button, and it doesn't work, then all the other marketing is a total waste of time. I could give you a £1 million market and a team of marketing experts, and we wouldn't be able to get that book off the ground if, when it comes to the last moment, you're sowing doubt in the reader's mind because the cover and the blurb are not doing it for them. So there's sort of fundamentals like that, getting them right. Then there's, marketing goes on forever, and there's 50 million things you can try. I do recommend a bit of trial and error of going, oh, well, this is an interesting idea. Let's try it. Let's see if that works for it. But actually, if you're going to get into self-publishing, what you need to do is really read up on what everybody's done before you. And the good thing is that a lot of people have gone before us already. There's been a wave of professional self-publishers who have done a lot of work and fortunately share it. So then you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You can go and go, right, okay, what things are working for other people time and time again, and pick it up where they left off. So you learn quicker. That's why I spent 6 months reading Joanna Penn's website, because I learned a lot of things quickly and got up to speed, as it were. So there's sort of that base level, and then a medium level where you can try lots of things, some of which are free, some of which are cheap, whatever. And then there's a level where you start paying for advertising. And that is a skill in and of itself. And I wouldn't recommend anybody tries it without seriously understanding how it works, because you can just throw money like happily out the window at it. It is one of those where you have to really understand how it works. There are lots of really good courses. There's a course by a guy called Mark Dawson, who does extremely well as an indie author and has a course running on how you do advertising on Facebook and Amazon and BookBub and loads of other things. He is a very good quality course, and it is worth learning how to do it yourself. And you can see it. You see it when you start paid advertising. You can just see the sales. You can see the response very quickly, but you do need to learn to do it right. I'm at a point now where I'm about to test outsourcing the advertising, because it takes up a lot of time and I'd rather be doing the writing. So there is something about that. Someone was talking about your zone of genius, which isn't because you're a genius, but it's what can only you do. So I can't get you to write my novels, but if you're an expert on Facebook advertising, then I could get you to do that, and that would be your zone of genius, and it's not my zone of genius. So it would be better if someone did it who was really, really good at it. So I'm now about to test that and see how that works out. But it is something that would be helpful if it could work that way.
So I just lost my entire screen. Very frightening.
Oh, your sound's gone.
Oh,
oh no, come back.
Here I am. Gosh, that was scary. Wow, this all is like brain aneurysm. So in terms of, I'm sort of going back to so costs. How much is all of this costing me?
It really depends. I mean, you can self-publish completely for free. You can, because you can get some free software that will format the book, and you can not work with an editor, and you can do all your proofing yourself, and you can make the cover yourself.
You will never sell a book, though.
You're going to struggle.
Yeah,
you're going to really struggle. So, I mean, I'll tell you what I pay for things, and then other people might have completely different experiences. An editor for sort of average size book, that's going to cost like £700. I do think it's worth it, especially early on as you're learning your craft, because you just learn so much. The first time I worked with an editor, I worked on one book with them, but then I went back and looked at a previous book I'd written, and I was just like, oh, so the whole of chapter 1 just needs to come out instantly, and this other thing needs to happen, and whatever. And I just saw it in a completely different way, which if you'd said to me before, I would have gone, that's my baby, don't you touch my baby. So you learn a lot from that. I pay about £500 per book to have it formatted and to have a professional cover made. So every book of mine that's going out in the world has already racked up like £1,000 plus to get out into the world. But, I make my living from this. So that's my business costs. Like every other business, you don't make a product with no money up front. That's not a thing. Any product, you're going to have had prototypes made, and you're going to have had the final thing made by somebody, maybe you, in which case it's all the hours you put into it and the packaging and blah, blah, blah. So there are costs, in my opinion, that are worth putting into novels as you go along.
I literally thought you were going to add a 0 to every single number you said. So
no, and I mean,
that's pretty
you know,
reasonable.
yeah, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, that's keeping things fairly tight. I think that's me sat there doing a lot of proofing work at the end for typos. If you have a best friend who's an English teacher, then you love them lots and you pay them in chocolates. You know, I have historians who check my history facts for me. There's lots of things that you can, effort that you can put in that takes away from payments that you might have to put in. And sometimes I sit there cussing when I'm on my 3rd round of proofreading and there's still an error and you just think, so many people's eyes have been on this and it's still got errors in it. But, you know, that's me putting in the effort. I could then hire a proofreader and that would add another few £100. So it depends where you want, where your skills are. Then again, you know, if you're an awesome graphic designer and you really can make a book cover, good for you. But I think it's worth putting a certain amount in. And again, it comes back to this being a job and a business. And products don't enter the world for free, generally. That's not how they usually work. I did go to the Hay Festival years and years ago, and there was a session on how to get published. And there was this woman, and she said, she referred to a book as a product, and this woman in the audience, I swear, actually said, "How dare you? A book is a work of art, not a product." And the woman was a bit kind of taken aback and didn't quite know how to answer, but I was like, it can be both. That's okay. It can be a creative work of art. It is also a product that has to be put into a shape that the reader can get it in, and it logistically has to make its way to them somehow. And when you're marketing it, yes, of course you talk about what a wonderful work of art it is, but you're also thinking about the business side of, I've got to get you from scrolling through Facebook to go on to Amazon and press the buy button. You know, it's both, and both is okay. And I think that's quite an important thing to get through to people.
Yes. Heal your darlings and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is all super wonderful and amazing, but how do you, and I'm sure you must have had that at some point, even though you sound so confident in yourself, and obviously you have some sort of back catalogue to give you all those pats on the back, but how do you go about initially going, I have such bad imposter syndrome, why would anyone want to read my book? And obviously I love it, but actually it's a piece of rubbish. You know, how do you overcome those doubts? How do you do it?
Yeah, a lot of writers talk about their book being rubbish and stuff, and I write for me. And this goes back to the reading thing. Because I read in this genre, I like this genre, and I write the books that I would like to read that don't exist. So I write to please me. Therefore, the books do please me. Turns out there are other people like me in the world. It makes me laugh because the more professional kind of level advertising and marketing, whatever I do, the more I realize who the target audience is, and the more it makes me laugh because they're me. They are me. So it makes my marketing quite easy after a bit, because I think, where would me be on the internet? What would I do? What would I like to see? The book trailer, I make it to please me. The cover, I make it to please me within the bounds of the genre. Because the more I go on, the more I realize my audience is me. Sometimes they're a bit older than me, and I'm like, that's because you've got more time on your hands to read. When my children are bigger, I will be reading more books as well. And therefore, I find that quite beneficial. So if you really love your genre, on the whole, I think mostly you should like your writing. That's not being arrogant, like you think you're the bestest in the world. It's just, you write what pleases you and what you would want to read. So it ought to please you, really. There are always moments when you get halfway through a novel and you go, because it's a long job, a novel, and you think, really? there's another 40, 50,000 words to write. But Neil Gaiman wrote a really fantastic thing where he said, there are days where you write and it feels like it's all magically flowing through you and you're just on fire and it's great stuff. And then there are days where it feels awful and every word feels really slow and boring and not at all, really not working for you. He said the interesting thing is that 6 months later, when you read it, you can't tell which was which. And I think that's fascinating. I'm so glad it came from, such a good writer and that he could say that. But I think it's true. I think there are days when it all feels flowy and days where it feels like a boring office job. But you can't tell afterwards because actually, the story that you wanted to tell is coming out. It's just sometimes it comes out slowly and sometimes it comes out faster.
And interestingly, I suppose it goes back to what you said initially. You need to look at this as a job. This is your job. This is not just some cute passion on the side.
Yes.
You need to make it, going to the office isn't always fun.
No, exactly. And there are, I meet a lot of writers at different levels, and I met someone recently and they were like, so I've written one book that's ready to go. And I was like, that's a great place to be. And they said, yes, so next year I need to make 50K from my writing. And I was like, that's not going to happen because you have one book and you're just starting out. It's not going to happen. And you wouldn't say that about any other job that you were brand new at. You have to think, I'm brand new. I'm like fresh out of school or uni and I'm going into a job. So perhaps I have natural talent. No doubt I have tons of commitment and enthusiasm and all the rest of it, but I am new at this job. Why on earth would you think that you would go straight in on a really top salary with the perception is wrong, and the perception is wrong because people don't see it as an ordinary job. And it would be better if they did, because you'd completely adjust your timeline, your expectations, your work ethic, everything would readjust if you saw it as a job, I think, to something more realistic, achievable, totally achievable, but realistic.
And I think that is so important. It's actually one of the reasons why at Brave Stars we kind of go against people saying, we say don't go for your passion, because it's so often this idea that, well, it's going to be my passion, so it's just going to be wonderful at all times.
Yeah.
When in fact it isn't. It's still your job, and maybe you can keep your passion as a passion.
Yeah. Well, I think what I like about Brave Starts is that because you get to meet the reality of it. So the reality may well include the passion and the wonderfulness of it, but it will also include the bits you sort of skimmed over in your fantasy. So, the bits you skim over in the fantasy of being a writer is that you have to build up a back catalogue, and that takes years, however quickly you write. And you got to sit down and write even when you don't feel like it and there isn't a muse and blah, blah, blah. And, I remember there was like floristry, and I remember thinking, well, of course that sounds wonderful, because who doesn't like flowers and the idea that you would arrange them beautifully and you would make people happy with your amazing arrangements. But the reality is you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go to the flower market and buy all the flowers. That is not the bit that you that you had in your mind, probably, but it's the reality of it. And that's what I like about Brave Starts, is that you see the reality that goes behind your passion.
It's so funny. I always use the floristry as a great example, which is why I love Brave Stars as well, because it's a win-win.
Yes.
So you may read, go through this and go, actually, I love everything that Melissa has to say. And, this is something I'm going to go for. Or you go, oh no, I'm not doing all of that.
Yeah. And I think if
fun.
you enjoy writing and you just want it to be on the side for your own pleasure, that is totally good. That is, do that. But if you want it to be a job, then you have to think of it as a job.
And it is hard work as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard work. It's very enjoyable. I'm very very happy to do my job, but it's work. It's very enjoyable work.
Could you imagine doing anything else?
I did lots of other things before. I was in business for years, and I enjoyed lots of other jobs. And I used to go to work mostly happy with most of them. But this one is, I'm not going to express it well. This job to me is who I am. It's not what I'm good at for somebody else. It's who I am. And when I couldn't do my job for other people because I was ill or I was on holiday or whatever, I would just go, nah, whatever, nah. If I can't do this job, I don't feel well, really. And I get very stroppy if you keep it from me in any way. So lockdown, homeschooling small children, I was enraged that I couldn't do my job. Enraged in a way that if they'd just gone, oh, you're on furlough from your office job, I'd have been like, oh, brilliant, cool. Yeah, it's a different thing.
Yeah, it is the difference that I sort of see is you are an author and you work as an accountant. Hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, there are accountants and they are a little bit boring, perhaps. But
maybe some of them have it. Maybe some of them, that's what they want to do.
Maybe that's a genius zone.
Yes.
What do you call it?
Zone of genius.
Zone of genius.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Totally. Right. I'm not going to keep you much longer because I realize that I could go on forever and ever and ever. And I basically just, what I actually want you to do is just for you to sit there and read me your books.
Okay. That might take a while. Having audio books made at the moment, you can work.
Yes. And I actually listened and I thought, oh, this is going to be Melissa reading her book. And I was like, no. I'm going to have to read
God,
it.
no, it's professional actors doing it much better. Yeah,
I know. I have just downloaded your free novella, which I'm
cool.
very excited about.
I hope you enjoy that.
Yes. Right. Diane, do you think there are any more questions that I need to ask? Unmute.
Sorry.
There you are.
I've used so many different tools. I couldn't find a button on this one. Well, I have 2 quick questions. I don't know if it's okay for me to ask them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and apologies if you covered this before I joined, but one is, how do you recommend going about finding an editor? And the second one is, what do you think about book writing coaches?
Editors, well, there's a few ways of finding them. One is to look in the back of books, because quite often people go, my wonderful editor, blah. So that's quite handy. They usually mention them by name. So that's useful. You can ask another writer who they use and that they would recommend. Joanna Penn has a list on her website of editors, I think she's got editors on there. I know she has book cover designers and things, so she's probably got editors as well, so that might be a good place. I think the Alliance of Independent Authors has a list of editors, so yeah, there's lots of places to find them. What's important is to find one you click with. And the tip I give to people about working with an editor is make sure that you have told the story you wanted to tell and that you are confident in it before you give it to an editor, because sometimes on writing forums, I see people who have given their work to an editor and the editor then has questioned things. It's their job. They'll go, should this be in third person? Do you think that the character should something instead of whatever they're doing now? Do you think that it might be better split into 2 volumes? You know, they'll ask questions. It's their job to question how you put the thing together. And then the person completely falls apart and just goes, oh, I don't know anymore. And now I've just lost all faith in it and I don't know. And I'm like, but you should know. You need to feel some confidence in it. You can sit there and think, are they right? Should it blah? But you need a bit more confidence in your story before you put it out to somebody. You shouldn't fall apart under the questioning. You know, I've had people go, shouldn't it all be in third person? I go, nope. nope, it shouldn't. I tested it. I tested in third person. I couldn't write it. So no, it shouldn't. It's the way it is. You know, should so-and-so get together with so-and-so? I had that feedback from beta readers once, and I went, no. But that was my very first novel, and I should have known, because there were 5 beta readers, and like 4 of them came back and went, surely she should be with so-and-so. And that should have been a big, big red flag to me to go, oh, okay, I need to look at this more. And that was, you know, that was my very first novel, and I was not as good at plotting as practice has led to. And when I went back to it a year later, fortunately it wasn't published, I went back to it and I went, oh no, they were right. She should have been with so-and-so. And I adjusted the plot a bit. So editors are great and you will learn loads, but you must be confident in the story you are intending to tell before you go to them, because you shouldn't fall apart when they ask you questions. You shouldn't doubt it. You can question yourself, but not go to pieces with it. And I've seen it rather a lot. What was the other one? Sorry. What was the other question?
The other one was about what you think about having a book writing coach.
Oh, book writing coach. Well, it depends what you're wanting them for. There's accountability. So, you know, sometimes people need someone that they know next month they owe them X thousand words. So there's that element. So you can have an accountability element to it. I would say a good editor kind of is a book writing coach, as in, you know, you can write something and then have feedback on that and then think about that and work on it. It depends how you like to work. The only book that I've ever written where the first draft got seen in small chunks as I went along was the book I did for my PhD. And I don't think it benefited it as much. I feel that it was written over too long a period and had too much input along the way. And it made me not hold it tight enough in my head somehow. It's a nice book, but it's not as tight as the others, and I think it was something to do with spinning it out over a really long time and getting input along the way, so that you're constantly going back to earlier stuff instead of moving on with it. So it depends how you like to work, though. I was talking to a woman the other day, and she's extremely collaborative. Her creativity comes to life when she works with someone else, which I would just be like, go away, go away and leave me alone. You can see it when it's done. But her creativity totally came to life for another person. So all her projects are collaborative in different ways. And that's what makes her spark up. So it depends. I think accountability is good. And I think learning craft from someone is good. In me personally, I would use an editor at the end, but
gosh, it's so interesting how many different ways there are of writing. Right? I mean, it sounds pretty obvious.
Yeah, so many. And when it's not your style, it's very odd to you. So the woman that I met the first time I had a coaching session with her, I was like, are you being dragged into projects with other people because they're like, oh, you're a writer, help me out with this? Sorry. Because that's, to me, as quite a solitary writer, that's what that felt like. That felt like, oh, you're just being dragged into other people's stuff and not getting on with your own. And then we did the second session. I was like, oh, no. I see it better now. You spark up when you get with somebody else. You're one of those that can, you know, when you have people who write together and those sorts of things. She was really good at that, which to me, I would find that difficult.
Yeah. Diane, any more questions? I sense a book coming out sooner rather than later.
No, that was great. Thanks, Melissa. Really interesting.
You're very welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much, Diane.
Nice talking to you.
And you. Thank you.
Hi, Diane. Bye.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you again. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Likewise.